If you've ever sat there wondering, why did she say that and then do the opposite? This is your turning point. Some women speak in ways that protect them, not expose them. Their words become a kind of emotional cover, a layer that lets them stay agreeable, safe, understood, without fully revealing what's happening underneath. And that's why trying to understand her through her sentences alone leaves you frustrated. You don't win by listening harder. You win by watching more carefully. The moment you stop searching for absolute truth in her statements and start reading her behavior, everything begins to make sense. Confusion lifts, doubt settles, and suddenly you see what she's trying to communicate, even if she can't bring herself to voice it clearly. Men often fall into the trap of treating a woman's words as direct access to her inner world. But many women grow up learning to speak in ways that are socially polished rather than emotionally precise. They're taught to phrase things so they won't be judged by friends, by family, by social circles, by the internet. So when a woman says, "I want a guy who listens," she might mean that on one level, but deeper down, what she responds to is a man she can genuinely respect, someone strong enough to hear her without losing himself. Words offer her safety. Actions reveal her sincerity. When a woman describes the kind of partner she thinks she should want, she's often painting the version of herself she wants the world to believe she is. But when she chooses who she gives her attention to, who she texts back, who she feels drawn toward, that's where her true emotional compass points. Her biology isn't listening to her public statements. It's responding to whatever feels real. That's why you might hear her talk beautifully about stability, commitment, loyalty, yet watch her get pulled toward intensity, unpredictability, or emotional spark. Her spoken ideal and her lived behavior can be two separate stories. If you take her words as absolute truth, you step into a version of reality she's trying to maintain, not necessarily the one she actually lives in. Psychology calls this a social defense mechanism, the tendency to use language to manage how we're seen. Women, in particular, often lean on this, not because they want to mislead anyone, but because it's a socially ingrained survival tool. But for men, it becomes a maze. You start thinking that if you decode the exact meaning behind every phrase, every maybe, every I'm not sure, you'll unlock her heart. But her words were never the map. They were the cover. If you want to understand her, you don't analyze her vocabulary. You observe her patterns, especially when no one's watching. A woman may insist she wants honesty, but if she consistently responds to thrill over transparency, her nervous system is telling you the truth. She may claim she wants a reliable man, but if she lights up only around the men who challenge her, that's the behavior you trust. Men lose power not from lack of effort, but from putting more faith in her verbal story than in her repeated actions. Remember this. Her words are the version she gives the world. Her actions are the version she gives herself. Men are raised to believe that listening always leads to understanding. But with many women, language is fluid. It shifts with mood, context, fear, hope, insecurity, or excitement. What she says in the morning might not match what she feels by nightfall. And when you, as a logical man, treat every sentence as a fixed contract, you end up missing the emotional shifts happening underneath. That's how men get blindsided. She says she's not ready for a relationship, so you step back. Then, weeks later, she's with someone else. It feels like betrayal, but often it's simply emotional movement. When she spoke to you, she meant what she felt in that moment. But when someone else triggered a different emotion, her actions followed that new feeling instead. This is cognitive dissonance, the gap between what someone says and what they do. Many women resolve that tension by rewriting their internal narrative rather than facing the contradiction head-on. They adjust the story to fit the new action. Meanwhile, men internalize it, assuming they failed. The disconnect wasn't personal. It was emotional fluidity. Men often believe that listening harder, agreeing more, sacrificing more, or softening more will build connection. But it's your ability to stay centered while she shifts that creates real trust. Don't debate her contradictions. Study them. If she says she hates drama but gravitates toward it, note it. If she claims she wants peace but consistently seeks stimulation, remember it. Your power isn't in challenging her version of reality. It's in understanding how her behavior shapes it. Every man has heard the line, "Women want a nice guy." So he becomes one. He listens endlessly, supports without boundaries, gives more than he should, and assumes that patience will spark desire. But she doesn't feel drawn to him. She appreciates him, thanks him, respects him, but she doesn't choose him. Instead, she invests her energy in a man who may not treat her with the same gentleness, but who carries an edge, something grounded, unpredictable, emotionally independent. This is the paradox of the nice guy dynamic. Kindness alone doesn't create attraction. Predictability kills tension, and tension is the oxygen of desire. Many women's emotional systems are wired not for constant comfort, but for stimulation, an internal dance between safety and unpredictability. When she feels too in control, her instinctive desire shuts down. That's why the man who's self-possessed, assertive, and hard to emotionally sway often stands out. He doesn't seek permission to lead attraction. He just carries presence. Some women blossom around a man who holds his ground, calm but firm, kind but decisive, empathetic but not approval hungry. When she senses real stability in him, her guard drops. She softens, she gives more freely, she nurtures, she invests, not because he demanded anything, but because admiration flips a switch inside her. She wants to contribute to that dynamic. Not out of obligation, but out of pride. Most men try to trigger that response by overgiving. But the emotional switch many women have doesn't activate through gifts, praise, or availability. It activates through presence, through a man who doesn't need validation to express his value. When she feels that grounded energy, she naturally steps into her more generous side. It's a psychological rhythm, a dynamic many people never learn. And that's the key. Don't just listen to what she says. Observe what she shows. Behavior is the language that never lies. And once you start seeing behavior for what it is, you'll notice something else unfolding beneath the surface, something subtle but powerful. Many women aren't at their happiest when everything is done for them. They come alive when they're giving to someone they genuinely respect. There's a deep emotional pattern behind it, a sense of purpose and connection that emerges when polarity is intact. It's not about roles or rules. It's about the emotional charge created when two energies complement each other instead of blending into neutrality. Picture two men. The first tries to earn affection by overperforming. He cooks, cleans, checks in constantly, listens attentively, and follows every piece of advice he believes will make him more appealing. He's convinced that if he stacks enough good deeds, she'll eventually realize his worth. Yet the more he tries to prove himself, the more invisible he feels. His generosity becomes background noise, something she appreciates but doesn't feel drawn toward. Now imagine the second man. He's not trying to demonstrate anything. He carries himself with a steady presence, a quiet confidence that says he values his energy enough to expect effort in return. He leads when it matters, not by force, but by clarity. He doesn't give because he's hoping to be chosen. He gives because he genuinely wants to, and he withholds when he needs to maintain balance. And without quite knowing why, she finds herself wanting to contribute, wanting to nurture, wanting to step into a more expressive, feminine space around him. Not because he asked, but because being in his presence opens that instinct in her, and it feels natural. That's why many women who speak passionately about equality in theory still discover that, in practice, they're happiest with a partner who knows how to guide the emotional rhythm. It's not contradiction, it's the pull of polarity. Polarity isn't about dominance or submission. It's the energetic contrast that creates desire, connection, and emotional gravity. Without it, everything becomes flat. With it, everything becomes charged. A woman in this dynamic doesn't soften because she's weak. She softens because she feels safe in the presence of someone who can hold emotional space without crumbling. She becomes more nurturing not out of obligation, but because admiration unlocks a part of her she can't access alone. Men who understand this stop begging for obedience or begging for affection. They cultivate respect first, and affection follows on its own. You don't need to instruct her on how to treat you. You just need to embody the kind of man whose presence evokes her generosity. Because in the end, many women don't respond to love alone, they respond to respect. Love can be gentle. Respect carries weight. There's a certain type of man many women keep around but never choose romantically. He's thoughtful, loyal, always there, always ready to listen when she cries about someone else. He convinces himself that if he waits long enough, if he stays supportive, one day she'll realize he's the one who truly cares. But that day doesn't arrive. Not because he isn't good, but because he became her emotional cushion instead of her emotional catalyst. Attraction doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in tension. Women often advise men to be patient, be kind, be her friend first, but that advice isn't a blueprint for desire. It's a blueprint for safety. It makes you non-threatening, easy to lean on, easy to trust, yet never quite compelling. That's the architecture of the friend zone. She sees you as family, as a constant, but not as a spark. There's a psychological reason behind this. Many women are drawn to polarity, the electric difference between masculine and feminine energy. When a man hides his passionate side to appear safe, he unintentionally removes that polarity. He becomes emotionally neutral, predictable, easy for her nervous system to manage. And in that predictability, she feels no fire. Think of the man she vents about, the one who irritates her and excites her in the same breath. He challenges her, stirs her emotions, disrupts her calm. And ironically, that disruption keeps her emotionally tied to him. It's the paradox most men never understand. What frustrates her often fuels her attraction. Meanwhile, the man who never disrupts her calm becomes invisible. He makes her comfortable, but he doesn't make her feel. So when she says, "You're such a good friend," she's not offering an opportunity. She's drawing a line. She's telling you that you're safe because desire isn't part of the equation. This is where many men go wrong. They take her advice literally and become the version of themselves she finds easiest to be around, but not the version she desires. You can't generosity your way into attraction. Desire isn't built from kindness alone. It's born from contrast, depth, and presence. The men who break free from the friend dynamic don't do it by trying harder. They do it by reclaiming their polarity. They pull back. They stop being her emotional service provider and start becoming a man with his own gravity. And suddenly, she's the one who notices the shift. The safety she once leaned on becomes the mystery she wants to explore. Because every time you act purely as her friend, you reinforce a dynamic where she gives you comfort instead of connection. The only way out is to stop performing the role she's assigned you and step into the version of yourself that carries tension, direction, and depth. By now, the pattern is unmistakable. What some women say often reflects who they want to imagine themselves as. What they do reflects who they are in the moment. And if you want clarity, you don't need more explanations, you need observation. Her words may confuse you. Her tone may soften you. But her actions will reveal everything long before she does. You don't need to judge her. You just need to see her clearly. Because once you master that clarity, the entire game changes not into bitterness, not into revenge, but into understanding. And that understanding becomes the foundation of your power. But the moment you gain that clarity, something else becomes unmistakable. A woman doesn't step into a softer, more nurturing space because she's fragile or unsure. She does it when she feels the presence of a man who can absorb her emotional storms without losing himself in the process. It's not about dominance. It's not about control. It's about stability, quiet, grounded, undeniable stability. When she senses that, her guard relaxes. Her expression changes. She begins to breathe differently around you, not because you told her to soften, but because her instincts tell her you can handle the weight she carries. That's why men who truly understand this don't chase harmony by demanding obedience. They don't try to force affection or negotiate desire. They focus on building respect first. Affection becomes the natural byproduct of that respect, not the reward for endless effort. You don't need to instruct her on how to treat you. You just have to embody the kind of presence she wants to respond to. Because in the end, many women don't respond to love alone. They respond to strength. Not physical strength, but emotional weight. The kind of weight she can lean on without worrying it will collapse beneath her. But then there's a different kind of man entirely. He's loyal, always available, endlessly patient. He listens to her cry about another man and convinces himself that being the safe option will eventually win her heart. He believes that if he shows enough kindness, gives enough reassurance, and stays long enough, she'll suddenly wake up and realize he was the one she needed all along. But that moment never arrives. Not because he lacks value, but because he became her refuge rather than her spark. When you become the cushion that catches every emotional fall, you stop being the force that makes her feel alive. And attraction, for many women, doesn't grow in predictable comfort. It grows in emotional friction. That's why advice like, just be patient, be nice, or be her friend first, often misleads men. It molds you into a version of yourself that feels safe to confide in, but not compelling enough to pursue. It makes you gentle enough to calm her, yet never bold enough to move her. That's the architecture of the friend zone. She trusts you deeply, yet feels nothing instinctive, nothing magnetic, nothing primal. She places you close enough for safety, but far from desire. The psychology behind this is simple. Female attraction often responds to polarity, the emotional tension between two distinct energies. When a man hides his desire to appear non-threatening, when he suppresses his confidence to seem polite, he unintentionally removes that polarity. He becomes neutral, predictable, easy for her nervous system to manage, but impossible for her instincts to crave. Without that edge, that spark, that hint of unpredictability, her attraction fades before it ever has a chance to ignite. Think about the man she can't stop talking about, the one who frustrates her, challenges her, disrupts her sense of order. He evokes a mix of irritation and excitement, and that emotional contrast keeps him living rent-free in her mind. She may claim he drives her crazy, but that chaos is the very thing that makes her feel. And feeling is what fuels desire. Meanwhile, the gentleman who does everything right, the one who remembers every detail and shows up without fail, slowly becomes background noise. Not because he's flawed, but because he offers equilibrium instead of electricity. When she says, "You're such a good friend," she's not opening a door, she's closing one. It's a boundary disguised as praise. She's telling you that she trusts you, but she doesn't feel that instinctive pull toward you. And most men misunderstand this because they take female advice literally instead of observing female behavior. When she encourages you to wait or insists that kindness is the key, she's describing what would make her comfortable, not what would spark her attraction. You can't charm your way into desire through patience alone. You can't negotiate attraction through niceness. Attraction is sparked through contrast, not compliance. And the men who escape the friend dynamic don't do it by proving they're worthy, they do it by reclaiming their edge. They stop being her emotional safety net and start becoming a man with boundaries, purpose, direction. The moment she feels she can't fully predict you, she begins to rethink you. Because every time you behave strictly as her friend, you reinforce a dynamic where she gives you emotional appreciation instead of romantic interest. The only way to shift that is to stop playing the character she assigned you and start stepping into a version of yourself who carries mystery, presence, and intention. You don't need her approval to change your role. You only need the courage to stop living on autopilot. By now, the pattern becomes clearer. A woman's words reflect her ideals, her self-image, her momentary emotions. But her behavior reveals her attraction, her priorities, and her truth. If you want clarity, stop dissecting what she says and start watching what she consistently does. Body language, tone shifts, effort, initiative, those tell the real story. Observation is your compass. It keeps you from being swayed by emotion and anchors you in reality. Once you start observing instead of reacting, confusion fades. You stop asking, "Does she like me?" because her patterns answer that question long before she does. You no longer chase reassurance. You stop negotiating your worth. You move from guessing to knowing. You don't need to confront her when her actions contradict her words. You don't need to punish or argue or demand clarity. You simply watch. People reveal themselves effortlessly when they don't feel pressure to explain. Her consistency will always expose the truth. So the next time she says one thing and does another, stay still. Stay grounded. Observe. That stillness is where your power lives. Because when you trust actions over promises, patterns over poetry, you never fall for illusions again. She might charm you with words, but her behavior will always tell you the story without editing. And once you learn to read that story, you'll never be fooled again.